Indie games have taken on a certain connotation ever since breakout games like Fez and Spelunky blew up a few years back. There's a shared aesthetic approach that I love in many of the indie greats out there, and the gameplay is a retro-futurist feast. But what if an indie game looked and played a little more slick? Astebreed is an indie game that looks nothing like its peers, and plays even better. Challenging our perceptions of what indie games might look like in the future, released in 2014, Astebreed is a shmup that is definitely a major influencer of another beloved game. The story of Astebreed is the usual alien overlords invading Earth. Puny human tech is no match for the aliens, until one of their robots is commandeered by a man named Grotto. Grotto dies, but before he does, he tells the AI in the mech, called the Crossbreed, that they need an orphan named Roy to pilot the Crossbreed to save humanity. Fast forward a few years and now you play as Roy. It's hard to understand the plot since most of the character dialogue plays while in combat. What's here is somewhat entertaining, but Gundam Wing, it is not. The gameplay is fantastic. The basics of combat are broken up into shooting, slashing, and dashing. There's a basic shot as well as a sphere that slows down time of anything within it. This is very similar to how lasers worked in Zone of the Enders. Lock on a target, release, and the projectile follows the enemy. The Crossbreed has a sword which allows for quick, decisive damage. This is by far the most effective way to damage both the nameless enemy fodder and the bosses alike. The dash attack allows the Crossbreed to warp across the screen with a directional input, and a slash is delivered if the Crossbreed warps into an enemy. The Crossbreed is only damaged if hit by a foe's projectile, so you can warp around the play area without worrying about running into the hitboxes of ships. The Crossbreed has an area of effect attack as well. Unlike many bullet hell games, there are no one-hit deaths. The Crossbreed has a health bar that refills if you avoid being hit. Taking the sum of all of its parts, Astebreed is an amazingly tight experience. It feels like the Crossbreed is completely in control. It moves effortlessly between bullets, despite the large amount of screen real estate it takes up. The sword allows for aggressive play, and balancing when to hang back with bullets and when to rush in and attack takes forethought. Certain bullets can be slashed away, making bellicose play the way to win. While the combat is impressive, even more so are the visuals. Astebreed runs at 1080p and a silky smooth 60 frames per second on the PS4. For a game this fast, this performance is completely necessary and impressive. Technical prowess aside, Astebreed has some amazing art direction. Let's start with the star of the show, the Crossbreed. It looks sufficiently alien, with a horned beetle-inspired head and sharp angular torso. However, the Crossbreed is at odds with itself. Only the top part was designed by Earth's alien adversaries. The bottom half is more crude, utilitarian, as it was designed by the primitive Earthlings. Once you gain access to the Astebreed, the Crossbreed's true form, the mech's unifying aesthetic is cleaner and more cohesive. Enemies are mostly made up of simple geometric shapes that are sufficiently extraterrestrial, but not all that interesting. The bosses, on the other hand, are inspired. Large imposing robots will greet you across the 6 chapters. This is especially true for the Asymptote Void, the Astebreed's rival mech. The backgrounds are excellent, with lots of visual variety and tons of detail. Probably the most interesting thing about this bullet hell offering is the shifting perspective. As I mentioned earlier, this shifting perspective may have served as inspiration for the excellent Nier Automata's shooting sections. Much like in Nier, the perspective moves between horizontal, vertical, and behind-the-back scrolling. Astebreed's gameplay variety is admirable, since each mode is fun to play, and none feels superfluous. Comparisons are rarely fair, but I'd say Astebreed is more fun to play than Nier Automata's scrolling sections. Additionally, there are some anime-style cutscenes with character art, which are pretty cool. The explosions and particle effects in Astebreed are an excellent accoutrement to the already outstanding presentation. The sound in Astebreed is at the same level as the presentation. Explosions, blast and boom, and the slash of the blade is sharp. There's a sufficient sci-fi texture throughout the sound effects that feels similar to other greats, namely Zone of the Enders. This is especially true when locking onto enemies with the blaster. The music is in line with many other anime soundtracks involving robots in space. It has a synth-heavy rock approach that is enjoyable. This isn't a one-note soundtrack though. While listening to this OST, I was surprised at how much compositional variety was found within. As you play through the 6 levels, the soundtrack ramps up in intensity nicely, giving the listener a sense of the ever-growing stakes of the action. By the 5th level boss, the soundtrack is veered into synth metal, with double bass drums and lightning-fast guitar riffs. I'd prefer a bit more bass throughout the listening experience, but the OST overall is highly enjoyable independent of the game. voice acting is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I like all the voice actors, but they're constantly chatting. The incessant shouting and weeping gets pretty old. Since there's so much dialogue going on during combat, it's basically impossible to follow what's being said. This makes the voiceover feel like it's cluttering the experience instead of adding to it. You can turn off the voices, which I'd recommend, after your first playthrough. The only highlight is with Daniel O'Brien. I've never heard Captain Falcon's Japanese voice actor, but it should be this guy. Astebreed will take you about a half an hour to play through, but of course, you're going to play this game a bunch of times. The difficulty on normal is quite challenging, but it is a fun challenge. The health bar helps a lot in regards to challenge. Astebreed will cost you about $20 on digital and about $60 for a physical copy. Both prices I feel are more than fair, as the game looks and plays great. Astebreed shows where indie games could go in the future, and I hope it's the trajectory. If you've had a Jehuti-shaped hole in your heart since owning the Enders 2, Astebreed is for you. That's it for week 3 of March Mecha Madness. This is Zach with Tanuki Games. I'd like to thank you for watching my video. Please remember that a like, a comment, or a subscribe means a lot to me and, of course, the channel. Enjoy.